Political differences dominate discussions in Washington, and we have our own dichotomies right here at home.
Currently on the council, there are 9 seats. About 4 of those are pretty solid liberals, and then we've got 3 pretty firm fiscal conservatives, and then we have 2 swing votes.
My expectation is that it probably will remain the council that we have right now.
Just ahead of elections in the state's 2 biggest cities, we bring you a political potpourri. It's Arizona Week.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support. Once again, your moderator, Michael Chihak.
We're never out of election season anymore, with constant campaigning, political divisiveness, and elections in Phoenix and Tucson on Tuesday. Both cities will choose city council members. The outcomes in Phoenix could key a power shift, while in Tucson, 2 Republicans are on what seems to be a quixotic quest to break the Democratic council clique. Here to discuss the 2 cities' political dynamics are Sarah Garrecht Gassen, an editorial writer at the Arizona Daily Star in Tucson, and Dustin Gardiner, City Hall reporter at the Arizona Repiblic in Phoenix. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's set some definitions to start. We're talking Democrats and Republicans in Tucson officially listed on the ballot. The Phoenix ballot, though, does not list party, but it's not nonpartisan, is it, Dustin?
Officially, it's a nonpartisan election, but there certainly are some pretty stark alliances and contrasts on the council. There are some big ideological differences in the District 4 race, particularly, which is Central Phoenix. We're seeing more of that talk about ideological alignment dealing with Justin Johnson and candidate Laura Pastor. Johnson is also a Democrat, but perceived as the more conservative of the 2. So we're seeing a lot of attention coming from some of the more partisan ends of the council wanting to get their suspected person in that seat.
So what's going on there, Dustin, is a struggle or a contest among liberals, moderates, and conservatives on the 9-member council. How does that break down now?
So currently on the council, there are 9 seats. About 4 of those are pretty solid liberals, and then we've got 3 pretty firm fiscal conservatives, and then we have 2 swing votes. So currently, the suspicion is that Laura Pastor, or not suspicion, the expectation is that Laura Pastor would fit in more with that liberal bloc, and that Justin Johnson would be more perhaps independent and shift from the liberal and conservative blocs, particularly on fiscal issues. And
Sarah, here in Tucson, the council is all Democratic, and all 3 of the seats up for election, the incumbents are running for re-election. One of them is unopposed, Steve Kozachik, so he'll be re-elected. What will the makeup of the council look like after Tuesday's election? Will it stay all Democratic?
I think that's what's probably going to happen, given the makeup of the wards and it's a mail-in election, so that changes things a little bit. But my expectation is that it probably will remain the council that we have right now.
And for both of you, I want to talk a little bit about the urban versus suburban phenomenon when it comes to the municipal elections. People may not be surprised to know that Tucson is more Democratic leaning, been that way for a long time. But the city of Phoenix is starting to lean more democratically too, while the suburbs in both urban areas, Tucson and Phoenix, are more conservative and more Republican. How's that playing out there, Dustin? Is that true? The city has a Democratic mayor, Greg Stanton, pushing forward. Is it going to continue to become more Democratic?
Well, the council here has been liberal leaning for quite a few years. I mean, before Stanton, we had Mayor Phil Gordon for 8 years. But we are seeing that there is more of an ideological emphasis on both sides. There is a more outspoken bloc of fiscal conservatives, and frankly, some of that emphasis is coming from that bloc. We have Sal DiCiccio and Councilman Jim Waring, both very outspoken fiscal conservatives, and that's quite a shift from where the council used to be. There used to be not quite as much emphasis on ideology and party. But overall, the tendency is towards a Democratic council. We've seen that with Daniel Valenzuela getting elected in District 5 just in 2011. Overall, we're seeing more, it looks like more Latinos potentially coming to the council and also more Democrats.
And Sarah, in Tucson, is that an apt description that the city remains a Democratic core and the suburban areas continue to be more conservative, especially out in the suburbs, Oro Valley, Marana?
I would say so for the metropolitan area. Tucson is a region, not just the city limits. When you get into Oro Valley, Marana, Saurita, Green Valley, those tend to be more conservative areas. And then the city limits of Tucson tend to be, especially in the urban areas and on the west side, more Democratic leaning.
And then in Tucson also, or in the Tucson area, on the ballot Tuesday is the incorporation of Vail on the southeast side of Tucson. Would you characterize Vail as conservative, liberal, middle of the road?
I would say it probably tends to be more conservative. I think it's very interesting anytime an area decides to take that step and say we want to possibly become a municipality, because it brings all sorts of different dynamics into play with taxation and representation and budgetary issues. I would say that it probably does lean more conservative.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that are coming forth in both of these election campaigns. Let's start with the economy and jobs. Dustin, what is the point being made by candidates in regard to building up the economy and restoring jobs in Phoenix, which was pretty hard hit in the recession?
Sure. What we're seeing with the Phoenix candidates, there's sort of a sentiment that Phoenix has sat back for too long. In the past, growth came to Phoenix and they didn't have to compete as much. Now we're seeing a lot of the big employers coming to the Phoenix Valley, going to Tempe or another suburb. And so I think there's a feeling among the candidates this year that Phoenix needs to become more aggressive about putting itself out there and marketing itself.
And here in Tucson, Sarah, we're seeing kind of that same thing where we had Democrats mostly talking about social issues. We now have Democrats actually putting forth economic plans, talking about jobs. Is that resonating here? Are the Democrats gaining any traction with that?
I think so. I think it's a situation, economics affects everyone, the economy affects everyone. And I think when we have a job situation where people are unemployed, where we have a downturn in the overall economy, of course that's something that's going to bubble up and come to the fore in any situation. I also would like to say that I think it's very interesting to hear Dustin talk about how people think in the Phoenix area that they haven't been aggressive enough. They haven't been going after economic development, where in Tucson you hear those exact same things in reference to Tucson, except it's against the backdrop of, well, they're all going to the Phoenix area. So I just find that to be an interesting parallel.
How much do you think that the candidates and the council members and the mayors think they can influence economic growth, Dustin? Is that a reality, or is it, as we heard in the presidential campaign last year, the government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does?
Yeah, it's hard to say how much the city can actually do to encourage these things. But in that vein, Phoenix has been trying to, I guess, clean up some of its permitting processes, cutting red tape, doing things to make the city more accessible to business. So from that standpoint, I think there are council members who feel like there's quite a bit they can do to make it more friendly. Whether or not that they can take credit for actual jobs is harder to say.
And that resonates here in Tucson too, Sarah, doesn't it? We hear that all the time from the mayor and council members.
Absolutely, and that's something that we heard a lot in this election season leading up to Tuesday, is that the steps that the city council members say that they've taken, certificates of occupancy, business development, making things easier, they say, to come in, to do business in the city of Tucson and to help spur the economy. Of course, their challengers are saying that they haven't done nearly enough. And so you're kind of getting this back and forth between here's what we've done, concrete steps, and then the broader picture saying it's not nearly enough, where there's validity in both of those points.
Let's talk next about the budgets, city finances. Both cities, Phoenix and Tucson, hit hard in the recession, lost a lot of revenues, sales taxes. and the double whammy, if you will, of the state taking away money or sweeping money that should have gone to the localities or had previously gone to the localities. What's Phoenix's fiscal situation currently, Dustin, and what are the candidates saying about it?
So Phoenix, like most other cities, has been on the rebound. Revenue has been growing, not as quickly as they had wanted it to last year, but that has translated into there being an extra emphasis on fiscal efficiency and transparency in this election. We're seeing a lot of the conversation dominated by issues such as pensions and the city food tax, which the city council just voted to cut in half starting next year. So we're seeing, I guess, sort of a real push and drive for the city to be more efficient. They've been on that tune for a couple years, but that's pretty much dominated most of the conversation, or at least a large share of the conversation in this election.
And Sarah, in Tucson, the council had to struggle with fiscal issues. The city manager they changed city managers in the middle of the recession, in fact, and had to become more fiscally responsible. Are the candidates pushing that forth as some accomplishment for themselves?
They are. Richard Fimbres, the incumbent in Ward 5, the Democrat, makes a big point of talking about how when he came into office, ever since then it's been cut, because of the very restrictive financial situation that Tucson has found itself in. I wanted to mention, if I could, that Tucson voters in the city will be facing two propositions that do have an effect, although somewhat somewhat affiliated with the budget situation, but not a direct taxation issue, in Prop 401 and then Prop 402.
And one of those is to increase the city's spending limit. Right now, the city can only spend a certain amount under state law without voter approval, and they want to go over that by $50 million. Doesn't mean they'll spend that much more, it means they'll have the authority to do that. Sort of like the federal debt ceiling issue, right?
That's a good analogy. And it's important, I think, for voters to understand that neither Prop 401 or 402 mean money out of their pocket. It's part of the state law that says that if a municipality sets a base expenditure limit of X, even if their revenues go over that number, they can't spend more than that number that has been set. So this is something that Tucson is going to voters for, saying we would like a base expenditure limit of $50 million on the off chance that they do increase revenues, that they'll be able to spend that money. It's not a tax increase, and it's not something that is a new fee. That would take separate action.
And Dustin, we have a little less than a minute remaining. In that time, you mentioned the pension reform in Phoenix, and the council there voted for that. Tell us a little bit about that. Public pensions are in bad shape throughout the state. Is that not right?
Sure. And Phoenix voters approved an initiative, it was a ballot initiative last March. They would make some broad reforms. That's expected to save about $600 million over the next 25 years. And now the council and these candidates running for some of the upcoming open seats, they're wanting to go further and cut back some things like pension spiking. The council voted to act on that this week. Some feel like it's not enough, and we'll probably see this issue come up again.
Dustin Gardiner, political and city hall reporter for the Arizona Repiblic in Phoenix. Sarah Garrecht Gassen, editorial writer for the Arizona Daily Star. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
One election issue next Tuesday will determine whether Arizona gets its 92nd municipality, Vail, southeast of Tucson. New technology is being tried in the electoral process there. AZPM's Christopher Conover has the story.
A group of women work diligently in a Tucson office processing ballots in advance of Tuesday's municipal elections. In Pima County, most of the balloting is being done by mail, so the workers right now are making sure the ballots were correctly voted.
When those ballots come back to the respective county recorders across the state of Arizona, they go through an inventory, see how many they've received. Then eventually there's going to be a signature check on the affidavit on the exterior of that envelope. Once that signature is verified, then the process is that envelope containing the ballot will eventually be opened. On very rare occasions, sometimes the envelope is opened and there's absolutely nothing inside, or a water bill, or a ballot from 2 years ago, or things of that nature.
Workers also deal with voting issues such as too many ballots.
You open a single envelope with perhaps a member of the household's signature on the outside that's been verified, but inside that envelope is more than one ballot, perhaps a husband and wife, or some of the children who are of voting age might have cast their ballot. All of those things are researched by the individual county recorder, sometimes telephone calls or emails or whatever best way to expedite a contact with voters so that we make certain that they are able to engage in the franchise and have their ballots counted.
Across Arizona, more and more voters are turning to early voting by mail, so processing like this is becoming a larger part of the election process. But plenty of people still like to cast a ballot in person, and that's where changes in technology are coming into play. In next week's election, Pima County is testing a new touchscreen system for handicapped voters.
They have the ability, as is displayed here, to have the ballot displayed to them in text in either English or Spanish. And if you're someone who has a vision impairment, either a total vision impairment or a vision impairment to such a degree that you're not able to read the screen, you also have the availability to hear the ballot read to you in either of those languages that you choose. You can also, as most tablets, change the text size to make it easier to read as well.
The new tablet-based touchscreen comes with headphones so the visually impaired can vote. It also has large buttons and foot pedals. The other advantage of the system is all of the computer technology is available off the shelf. Nelson also says poll workers in Vail, east of Tucson, will use tablets to make sure voters are in the right polling place.
They'll provide their valid Arizona driver's license, and if no one's looked before, there's a barcode and a scan bar on the back of that driver's license. They'll be able to scan that through that tablet, and it'll call up their information automatically, so there's no more shuffling through the papers. And then they'll offer the voter a stylus, and they'll actually sign on the screen, similar to doing a transaction at a department store or something of that nature.
Christopher Conover joins me now. Christopher, thanks for that report.
No problem.
Is Pima at the forefront of using technology in the electoral process?
It's interesting. Two other counties, Yavapai and Yuma County, are already using those e-voter rolls, if you will. Maybe not the iPad version that Pima County is getting ready to use, but a version of it. And three other counties, including Maricopa, are looking into it and have requests for bids to see how much it would cost.
So we'll see the high-tech continue to infiltrate, if you will, our electoral process.
Absolutely, just like everything else, new technology is coming on board all the time. And the election supervisors for each county just have to balance the new technology with the cost and when will that new technology be out of date.
And that'll become a constant on the electoral scene. And another constant, of course, is raising money. And we're here to talk with you this afternoon about the latest campaign finance reports, the third quarter reports. We want to take a look at the three competitive congressional races in Arizona. Not that the others won't necessarily be competitive, but the ones that Republicans are focusing on because they're held by Democrats, and there's a bit of a balance in those, so they could swing either way. First of all, the reports are a little late this quarter. Why is that?
The reports are a little late, and that's due to the government shutdown. Candidates for Congress and all the federal offices still had to report on time, if you will, by the deadlines, but the government shutdown came along right about the deadline and shut the website down from the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, so we couldn't see those reports until very recently.
9 congressional districts in Arizona, 4 held by Republicans, 5 by Democrats right now. Republicans hoping to change that balance and maybe go 6-3 if they can, pushing candidates out there in these 3 competitive races. Let's talk about them one by one, starting with Congressional District 1, Democrat Ann Kirkpatrick, a freshman. Actually her second term in Congress, but she's had a few years between the 2 terms. First of all, where's District 1?
District 1 is a very interesting district. It stretches from basically the north end of Metro Tucson, Marana, Oro Valley, all the way to the Utah border. Skirts around Phoenix, really doesn't get into Phoenix, but includes Flagstaff, includes a number of Indian reservations, including the Navajo Nation up in the northern part of the state.
A couple of fairly powerful Republicans or prominent Republicans challenging one another to have the right to challenge Kirkpatrick in that race. How is she doing? Is her incumbency going to be an advantage there?
It's an interesting district because the southern part of the district, the northern part of Pima County and into Pinal County, is fairly Republican. But the northern part of the district, Flagstaff, is much more Democratic. So it's an interestingly split district. Kirkpatrick has teamed up with other Arizona Republicans in Congress to sponsor a couple of bills, trying to put herself as that bipartisan candidate member of Congress. But the Republicans, the Republican National Committee, from the day Kirkpatrick was elected, have been going after her. They are putting money in this race and are very much going after her. They see her as vulnerable.
What kind of money is Kirkpatrick herself reporting as having collected so far?
So far, Kirkpatrick, she brought in about $285,000 in the last quarter of this year, the last reporting quarter, and she's got about $650,000 on hand. So considering we're just about to the day, a year out from the election, she's not in bad shape with $650,000 on hand right now. She's done a little bit of spending at this point. She was running some radio ads in July, about $800 worth, really not a lot of money. And she's been paying employees and some fundraising costs and things like that. So most of her expenses really aren't active campaigning, if you will, except for that radio ad. It's more just maintaining the system and starting to bring in money, which costs money.
And the Republicans in the race are led by, we have to say, State House Speaker Andy Tobin, who has probably the greatest name recognition from small town Paulden in Yavapai County. Tobin's really been going after Kirkpatrick, at least with press releases and the like. What's he doing in raising money?
We don't have his numbers yet because he got into the race at such a time that he did not have to report in this quarter. But based on his name recognition and based on the fact that he is going after Congresswoman Kirkpatrick so hard, it's a pretty safe bet that he's got money in the bank and more is coming in. Now, he has two other Republican challengers, if you will. Adam Quasman, who is a first-term state rep from the Tucson area. He's got experience, though, in congressional campaigning because he was instrumental in Jesse Kelly, who ran in what is now District 2 down here as a Republican. Adam was very involved in Kelly's campaign, so he knows how to run a campaign. And also Gary Kine. We don't have numbers, financials on any of them, again, because of when they got into the race. They weren't required to report to the federal government yet.
And in District 2, Congressional District 2, southeastern Arizona, the eastern half of Pima County, the eastern half of Tucson, and all of Cochise County, a couple parts in the eastern part of the state as well. Democrat Ron Barber, another freshman who took over for Gabrielle Giffords after she resigned following the January 8th shooting. He has pretty good war chest going, right?
He has a very good war chest going. Right now, Congressman Barber has just about $770,000 on hand. Again, a year out, that's pretty good. And he raised over $300,000 in the last quarter. So it's a pretty safe bet that by the end of the year, when we see the year ends, he'll be pretty close to that $1 million mark coming into 2014, the actual election year, which means he'll only build on that as we go through the election cycle.
On the Republican side in that race, Martha McSally hopes to challenge Barber again. She lost to him by a relatively narrow margin in the last election in 2012. What's her fundraising looking like right now?
McSally is also doing well. She brought in about $349,000, $350,000, so she brought in more than Barber, but Barber had more on hand to start with. She's only got about $390,000 on hand, as compared to Barber's almost $770,000. But she did very well for herself in the quarter.
And there's a third candidate in that race, or a second Republican, I should say, Ed Martin. No report on him yet?
No report on him. He just got in the race. McSally really just got in the race, but she had her open campaign account from the last cycle, and she's been quietly fundraising, or maybe not so quietly fundraising the whole time.
And then the third competitive district we want to look at is District 9 in the Phoenix area. Another Democratic freshman, Kyrsten Sinema. What's the fundraising looking like there?
Cinema, again, we see a lot of stuff, email, press releases from the National Republican Party going after Cinema. So she's out fundraising hard because she knows she's going to get a big challenge on a national level. She raised about $320,000 this last quarter. And she, again, nearing that $1 million mark, $780,000 on hand. Again, the power of the incumbency, and she's kept those campaign accounts open since she was elected.
And on the Republican side in District 9?
On the Republican side, we have three people, Andrew Walter, Wendy Rogers, and Vernon Parker, who ran last time. Walter raised about $40,000 and has about $150,000 in the bank. And Vernon Parker raised about $127,000 and has about $80,000 on hand. What's interesting about Parker and looking at his donors, the vast majority are from out of state.
And we'll probably see more of that as these races get more competitive and the Republicans look to retain their majority in the House of Representatives, and the Democrats look to eat into it.
Absolutely. We will see plenty of out-of-state money coming in. These are three what Republicans view as vulnerable seats, freshman Democrats in districts that are, especially District 1 and District 2, that are very close on registration numbers, so Republicans see an opportunity to pick a seat off if they can. And Sinema, being a freshman Democrat in Phoenix, granted her district is fairly Democratic, they also see a good opportunity to try and pick someone off.
Christopher, thank you so much for that report. We look forward to the report come January when the next quarter is due.
Absolutely, we'll look at it.
That's our program for Friday, November 1st, 2013. Next Friday, a preview of the state's World War II memorial being built in Phoenix, and a visit with veterans and military advocates. For Arizona Week, I'm Michael Chihak.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.